Welcome to the Monica Kelly Light Body Podcast. Introducing your host, Monica Kelly.
Hello, this is Monica Kelly, and I am continuing with my background story, hoping to get listeners interested in my podcast and a taste for flavor for what I will be covering in this podcast. Everything from Western psychology to metaphysic topics, psychic development, hypnosis, even galactic concepts and extraterrestrials, so it should be fun. And I have been talking to you today about my background. And again, just to do the overview, I was talking about my upbringing in the Christian church, and then my study in Eastern philosophies, and then my graduate study, Western psychology, and then after that, hypnosis, energy work. And I was starting the story of psychic development and how I came into working with the angels and the masters. And I was telling the story about Key coming to me in his instruction, and eventually that led me to Yosemite. And many interesting things are happening throughout the whole 3 days that I spent in Yosemite on my own. But I'm going to conclude the story with the last day that I'm in Yosemite by myself. And I'm hearing angels, I'm hearing all kinds of... In the park, I'm pretty much just hearing the angels and the masters, but I notice when I come back to the hotel room, not so clear. You know, there's all kinds of psychic phenomenon was happening to me. And also hearing negative voices as well in the hotel room. And this was before I understood the process of clearing the space, clearing myself, getting very grounded, asking for help from the angels, all of that. It was just happening so fast. So I get up the next morning, very early in the morning, and because I had not slept well. The night before, I had definitely some spiritual warfare go on. I definitely felt like there was negative energy in the space. And I've been working with the concept of negative energy and negative energy release work for quite some time in my practice, pulling negative energy out of people's chakras. But I was nowhere near as sensitive as I was during this time period, because in the past, prior to the operation, I really felt like negative energy couldn't touch me. I really felt immune to it. I knew that it was occurring because of all the hypnosis stories, and I will be covering a lot of that information in this podcast, how the whole process of having people look into their chakras and tell me what they see and the colors and all of that, and how that's been developing in my hypnosis work. So I had been aware of what people were seeing and experiencing through trance work, but I always felt very immune to it. I felt like there was a wall up between me and my clients, and that they were doing their work. I was facilitating the process, and that I was invulnerable. I was protected. I was safe. And I felt very strongly about that. Through many, many years of spiritual practice and knowledge, I just felt a spiritual confidence. But when I came into this psychic awareness, and ultimately what I understand to be fifth dimensional consciousness, I didn't feel so safe. All of a sudden, the negative energy, I could sense it was in the room. And the negative energy, it would hiss at me or say things to me. And that morning, I had a terrible nightmare, and I never have nightmares. That's just not something that ever happens to me. And I'm aware that when people have nightmares, they've got stuff in their subconscious, right? And however you want to define that, Western psychology just kind of says, yeah, you had a trauma, you need to process. But when you get into the pranic healing or the negative energy release work, it's more like, no, you've got leftover trauma residue, negative energy. We've got to get that out of you and fill you back up with the light. So I had a nightmare, and it was gripping and uncomfortable. And I had understood that I couldn't wait to get to the burn ceremony because I had been carrying around a lot of garbage. Meanwhile, the other thing I noticed that I could do was I could come up with the names of my angels, and I could also come up with the names of negative energy. And it was talking to me. And I had kind of forgot my Christian upbringing, which said somewhere in the Bible, I know it says, never say the name of a negative energy out loud because it will give it more power. Just like if you say the name of an angelic being out loud, it will give that more power. Or if you say the name of the master, if you're going to pray in the name of Jesus or pray in the name of another master like Buddha, it's going to invoke their vibration and it's going to be more powerful. I was just getting so much psychic information, I couldn't quite differentiate. And so I was writing down a whole bunch of names. And Key came in and he basically said, you need to burn all of those pieces of paper. Those are not angelic names. Those are some of the negative energies that you've been in battle with. And we want you to burn it. You know, you can't just throw it away. You need to burn it to the sky. You need to burn it to the air. It needs to go up into the sun. So I had been carrying around a bag of paper which I knew needed to be burned because it had negative energy in it. And I was anxious to get to the fire ceremony because I knew I was carrying this load, I was carrying this baggage. So I was anxious to get there. And in the meantime, it had to sit with me in my hotel room. And as a result of kind of carrying that energy and not being able yet to release it, because divine guidance was telling me I needed to burn it at the shamanistic ritual, that was in the room, and it was terrifying, and it was attacking me. And that night I had a nightmare, which I don't normally have, and it was terrifying. And so I woke up at 4 a.m. again, understanding that whatever was in that pile that was going to be burned was not good, and it was in my space, in my head, and I wanted to get to that ceremony as soon as possible. Now, mind you, it's about 4 a.m, and I'm asking what to do, and so they say, well, it's too early to do anything, but you can start packing up your car and putting everything in the trunk and I had these very specific directions because they did not want me to mix these elements of the ceremony that were negative with other elements of the ceremony which were positive. So that's what I did. I got up early in the morning because I couldn't do anything else, and again organized the elements of this ritual into different parts of the rental car I was in this time. And then, a few hours had passed doing that work, and the sun was just barely coming up. And I remember thinking, it's too cold. I'm in the mountains, and the sun has to be up in the sky for it to be warm at, 7,000 to 10,000 feet. So they said to me, we're going to go back, drive in the other direction. We're going to take you back to a lodge where you can get breakfast. So I got in my car and I drove to this lodge. And when I got there, there's big bear totems like all over this lodge. Like a sculptor had carved 15 or so totems. And when I get my book together, of course I had been documenting this whole journey with pictures and in my journal. And I was talking to Big Bear, if you listen to the prior podcast, who now I know to be a husband in a former life, a tribal leader. And he goes on to say, I know I'm a master. I'm at the level of master, and I'm here representing all tribal nations, all tribal people, all shamanistic cultures, and I'm here to instruct you in this part of your development. Now, mind you, while I've been a yoga teacher and a meditation person throughout the years, and while I've read all these books and studied extraterrestrials and all this fun stuff, I've never been into crystals. Not really. Just hadn't got there yet. I've never really been into burning sage or candles. I mean, I would burn a candle here and there, but I had done altar work in my development, creating an altar and sitting in front of an altar. But I have had other friends who have studied with Kinsenderos or other ritualistic healers where, they're like, you got to burn the sage, you got to burn the copal, you got to burn the incense. And I kind of never really identified with that. I didn't discount it, thought it was a great practice, but I never really strongly identified it. So for the first time, I have this Native American big man. I can see him clairvoyantly, just a muscular man, huge man. And he's like, gotta burn the sage, gotta burn the wood, gotta light a match. Where's your candles? All of it. And I want you to buy crystals, all of that. And they basically said, before you go to the fire ceremony, this was the day before you do the fire ceremony, we want you to buy crystals. So I said, well, where do you want me to buy crystals? And they said, well, go to the general store. And in Yosemite Village, which is in Yosemite Valley, there's just one place to buy crystals. It's the big general store. And I thought there was a crystal store there, but no, it's just a general store. And if you've been to Yosemite, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is the day before. I go in there, and literally they're saying, buy this crystal for Clovis, buy this crystal for San Diego, buy this crystal, and I don't know the names. I don't know the meanings. I'm just hearing, buy it. Buy these crystals for your house. They just have this little stand, and I do. I know what I'm experiencing, and I know that it's coming from a divine place and a place of ritual, so I buy it. So here we go. We're back into the park after eating breakfast. And breakfast was an amazing experience. There was a little tea ceremony that occurred, and I really felt like that's another thing. I was asked to give up coffee and start drinking tea. Never drank tea in my entire life. I've always been a coffee drinker. My mom's from Brazil. And I hadn't gave up coffee cold turkey 3 weeks ago and had started drinking tea. And I'm sitting down to breakfast by myself, physically by myself, but spiritually with all these other friends of mine. And they take me through a tea ceremony and just on and on. I still had some time before the sun came up, so I remember I asked if I could journal, and I sat in a different area and journaled while I plugged in my phone and walked around and took pictures of all the totems. And finally, it's like 10:30 a.m. The sun is getting higher. It's warm enough to be outside, and I get the go into the park. Let's start the ceremony. So the day before also, I talked to the park ranger. I knew exactly where to go. My car, mind you, is full of ritualistic items. I had been told I needed to wear certain colors, the colors of the chakras. I needed to put all my healing tools out. Everything needed to be saged and blessed. And then, of course, they wanted me to do 2 fires. And as it turned out, the picnic area that I went to, right inside the west entrance, had 2 fire pits. And we're in the month of February here, so it's not, there's a drought, so there's no snow, so there's no people, is my point. If you go to Yosemite in the summertime, it tends to be crowded with tourists from all over the world. But I managed to be in this picnic area with 2 tables and 2 fire pits, instructed to start the ceremony to purify and cleanse myself. And while that was happening, it ended up taking the whole day. And I went step by step, and they'd stop and say, take some pictures. Or Key would say, write a little in your journal. And they really wanted me to document this experience and everything that was happening to me. And this was the beginning of my awakening. And in the weeks to follow, even more and more information continued to come. I found out how many angels I had on my immediate team, how many angels I had on my potential team as I advanced dimensionally. I found out how many masters I had on my immediate team, how many masters I had on my potential team, and in another podcast I'll explain that vocabulary. I found out which of those masters were from Earth that I had studied with or knew of, and I found out that some of the masters on my team were galactic, and some of the masters on my team were astral. And as time developed, I ended up learning more and more about this and was guided to write about this, start podcasting about this, and start giving readings for people that wanted to know about their angels, about their origins, and about their counsel. And also continue to work as a healer to assist people in releasing negative energy and to explain my concepts to anyone that was willing to listen. This is about the time that they were starting to let me know that I had had a near-death experience when I had had the operation, and that when I went up to heaven, when I was out of my body, I had seen everyone, including my father, who had passed, and that everyone was overwhelmed and overjoyed to see me on my council and also my spiritual family, and that they had made me aware of my mission and my journey and how I would be able to help myself heal and also my audience. And that is kind of the introduction story to this podcast. And I hope that you'll stay with me because I have a lot to share. And there's so much more to talk about in so many different areas. And I'm happy to speak to you. And I hope that you will continue to join me. Thank you very much for listening and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to Monica Kelly Lightbody. For more information on downloads, workshops, and private sessions, please visit www.monicakellylightbody.com.